Hello and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to learn about how to add CSS classes to particular elements on a web page using jQuery. And in this process, I'll give you a good overview of jQuery and CSS foundations along with HTML and sort of fit all of this together and go over some examples as well as the Chrome dev tools. So this lesson will set the stage for the remainder of the course. So I've already opened the source code for this lesson and I'm using Atom, and the way to open that is you just go to File, go to Open, and it's actually this lesson right here, jQuery Tutorial 4. Click on that folder. You should already have all the source code downloaded for this course, and then hit Open, and that should open up the code for this project. Now inside of the CSS folder, there's actually a CSS folder for this lesson. I have a style sheet defined. Now in this course, I already of course expect you to be somewhat familiar with CSS as well as HTML, but if you're a little shaky on those concepts, don't worry, we're going to be visiting those topics as we go along, and it should be a good reminder, but this should not be the first time you're seeing this stuff, all right? These are two CSS classes, and they allow for specific design. So this class, and you could tell that these are classes because there's a dot before the actual class name. All right. If these were IDs, there would be a pound sign before it. So the ×2 class allows for font size to be doubled. That's what this 2em means, which means 2 times. The em is sort of a multiplier. So we are doubling the size of whatever font size this class is applied to. And then for this colorful class, whatever element on an HTML web page that we apply this class to, it's going to turn that color to pink, okay? And then in the JS folder is the jQuery library, which is there in all of the source code that you download for this course. I've already set that up here for you in the JS folder. So in this lesson, we're going to be coding in the index.html page. And the jQuery is going to be in this script section down here. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, that I prefer having a separate file for jQuery. But in this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can actually write jQuery code in this HTML. And then starting from the next lesson, we're going to move on to the better standard of separating your jQuery code from your HTML code. All right. So in this lesson, we're going to type our jQuery code right here in this script section. Now, the jQuery library is being loaded right here using the script source attribute, and we'll give the location of where our jQuery is in the JS folder, and this is the file. And then for the CSS, we use this syntax right here. Instead of the script, we use a link, and then we tell the kind of link it is. It's style sheet, and it's going to be a CSS. That's a type for the file, and then the href is going to contain the location for where we have the file. It's in the CSS folder, and the file is called style.css. And that means the classes or IDs that have been defined in this style sheet are accessible in this HTML web page. So we've linked to this HTML web page the JavaScript as well as the CSS. So we're ready to start coding jQuery in this script tag. So currently we have this hide functionality that's going to be applied to all paragraphs. So you saw this in the previous lesson. This is going to target all of the paragraphs on the page, and it's going to hide them. Okay. So the first part is the CSS selector. It selects all of the paragraphs on the page, and the hide function is being applied to them. So these two paragraphs are going to be hidden. So to see this in action, I'm going to save the file, even though we didn't make any changes, but that's a good convention. Anytime you make any change, just save the file and then open it in your browser. So the way you can do that is just navigate over to where you have the code. That's jQuery Tutorial 4, and then just click on this index.html, double click on it, and it's going to open your default browser, which I have right here. And this is the file that got loaded, this index.html at this file location. And right now it's only showing this don't forget this one, or this particular sentence is being shown. So let me close this for now and minimize this folder here. So this sentence is being shown because it's not a paragraph. All right, we're hiding all the paragraphs according to the jQuery. So this sentence is being shown. If I wanted to, for example, hide this, I could just put h4 in here instead, and then run this code again, and notice that it's showing the first two sentences here. We're hiding the h4 tag and we're not hiding the paragraph tags, okay? So we know our jQuery is working. So in this style.css file, we have two classes defined here. We have this times2 and this colorful class, and these allow for designing our HTML. So we can actually apply the add class method to our elements on the page. So for example, this h4, I can call the add class method, or function rather. This is typically called a function. We are applying this function on all of the h4s on this page. Now there's only one of them, so we're going to apply this add class function on this particular element, and we're giving the argument to this add class function. We're giving the argument of the particular class, and that's going to, I can give it, for example, colorful. Okay, this class is defined in this style sheet right here. Let's navigate back to our folder where we have the code, and I saved this document here. So now all I have to do is double click this index page, and notice that it colored this with pink. The h4 element is being, the sentence in there and those tags is being colored pink because we applied the colorful class. Now let's go back to the code. We can give two classes. For example, along with colorful, I could do times2. Right, this is the name of the other class that we have defined in this style sheet right here. So that's going to multiply whatever the current font size is of the h4 tag, right? It's going to multiply that by 2, the size. So it's going to color it pink as well as times it by 2. So now I've saved this file. Let me open that up back in our browser. I'm going to double click the index.html, and there we go. It's colored, as well as the text in the h4 tag is doubled in size. Going back to the code here, just like how we can add classes to specific elements on a web page, we can actually remove the classes too. So for example, here to the h4 tag, we're adding the colorful class as well as the times2. I can remove times2 on the next line. So let me just copy this. It's going to be essentially almost the same code. Instead of add class, that method is called, of course, remove class. And I'm going to remove the colorful class. Okay, so here we're adding to the h4 text, which is, don't forget this one, this particular sentence, we're adding these two classes, and then we're removing the times2 one. So now, by the end of, this script is going to execute line by line. So it's going to first execute this line. It's going to add those two classes, and then on the second line, it's going to remove one of them. So I expect to see a small pink text as opposed to a large one, because we're removing this times2 on the second line here. Okay, so let's test it out. Let's open up the browser again. This is that page. I've saved this HTML document in the text editor. Now I'm just going to double click it here, and lo and behold, this is just pink text. It's not as large as it was. All right, we removed the times2 class. Let's go back to the code. So just like how you can have two classes in the add class, you can have two classes in the remove class. Not just two, actually. You can have as many as you wish. So if we had some other class called, for example, hey there, right? If this particular class was defined in our style sheet file, we would have been able to remove this class as well if it was applied to the h4. Okay, so there's no limit to the number of classes you can give to add classes and remove classes. All right, there's no commas, just spaces between the different classes. All right, so let me get rid of that extra hey there, as well as this. We don't need that now. So moving on, let's say we just want to target this particular element on the web page, right? Just this text here, we just want to target this sentence and no other sentences. We want to make it large as well as pink. So how would we specifically target this paragraph, not the others, just this particular paragraph, and make it pink as well as large? So think about that for a minute, and then I'm going to jump in and do that here for you. So the way we would do this is we first need to reference a paragraph, of course, because this is a paragraph. And then notice that it has a class attribute. It has a class attribute. What is the class? It's called super. So I could do p dot, because remember in CSS we have to reference when we talk about classes, we need to they have a preceding dot. So p dot super, and then we don't need this second line here because the instructions were just to make that middle paragraph right here to be colorful as well as large. So this should target this particular sentence. Let's give it a go. Let's open our browser and refresh the page here, and boom, there you go. Notice that this is large as well as colored. All right, and we were specifically able to target the middle paragraph there because it has a class. If this was an ID, that's another attribute that you should be familiar with. If this was an ID, instead of dot super, it would have been pound super, because you reference IDs with these hashes instead of dots. So this, of course, is going to work the same exact way. Let me refresh the page and notice that there's no change there. Okay. Now let's say you wanted to target two elements. We wanted to target this paragraph as well as this H4 right here. So just these two sentences we wanted to target. How would we go about doing that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. We are targeting this particular paragraph, right? Let me change that back to class, because that's how you're going to see the code when you download it. And this should be a dot. So p dot super, we're targeting this. Now, if we want to also target this, we need to add that to the CSS selector. So we need to, first of all, put a comma, and then we give the h4 tag dot super. Okay. So, and then you could choose to have a space there or not, but the important thing is we need a comma to separate the two selectors that we are targeting here. If I run this, both of these should be colorful as well as large. So let's go back to the web page and refresh this, and notice that both of them are in fact larger and they're colored pink. Now you might be wondering, do we have to prefix the paragraph as well as the H4? And the answer is no, because both of them, they have the class attribute that is the same. All right, it's called super. So all I have to do is I could remove the specific tags, and I could just say, get me all of the tags on the web page that have this particular class, and the class is .super. So if they have them, that's going to be our target, and we're going to be adding these classes to them. So this should essentially work exactly the same way. So let me refresh the page here and notice that, it's working. Now, just to clarify, for those of you that are that might be very new to this CSS business and HTML, this super class is nothing special. I made this up, right? I can name this whatever I want. I can call this Jigger, for example, and and when I run this, of course, it's not going to work. Let me run this. Notice it's not going to color them pink because Jigger is not the one that's referenced here. We're referencing .super, which doesn't exist anymore. So if we wanted to highlight these, we would just write .jigger, right? So there's nothing super or special about that super class. I made that up, and I made these classes up too, okay? So we're giving these specific tags different classes, and that's part of HTML. You can give your tags different kinds of attributes, and we're giving it a class attribute. We can also give it the ID attribute, okay? So if I run this now, it's going to work because I'm referencing .jigger in the selector, okay? Now if I made this an ID, I want you to figure this out. Pause the video and try this out on your own. How would you make both of these be large and pink? Think about it. Try this out, pause the video, and then you can resume to watch my solution. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too bad. All we have to do is we are first of all referencing one of the elements. That's this guy right here, the dot jigger. That's a class. We're targeting this sentence here. To target this one, we can't use dot because this is an ID. And remember, for IDs, I said it needs a hash. So we need to put a comma here and put the hash symbol or the pound symbol, as some people call it, and then write jigger like that. Okay. And now we'll be able to reference, target both of these elements, and it should be working as expected. All right, there you go. So we covered a lot of ground in this video. We talked about targeting specific elements on the web page by an ID, as you can see right here, as well as by classes. All right, so we talked about targeting specific elements based on their tags as well as their attribute, such as class and ID. And then we also talked about applying the add class function on those elements, as well as the remove class function. Okay, so these are two functions that I want you to, you're going to have to memorize these. And there's a lot of other functions that you're going to learn about in this course, and I want you to practice them on your own so that you're able to retain all of that information. But anyway, this lesson was, I moved at a very slow pace. I want it to be slow for those of you that are, that may have forgotten CSS and HTML. And this should have been a refresher for you. And hopefully I've brought back your memory on how classes are referenced and how IDs are referenced in HTML, and that CSS looks like this. Okay, if I wanted to create another style element, I would use the hash symbol and just name it, for example, jigger, and this would be a style element with an ID. And this could have the font size be 3M, as well as I can give it a color green, for example. Okay, now let's actually apply this on one of the HTML elements here. Let me comment out this line so there's no jQuery being applied right now. And notice that this particular sentence I'm saying is with the ID jigger. Okay, so this should be colored green, and it should be 3 times larger than what the default H4 text is. So now if I refresh the page, notice that this is 3 times as large, and it's colored green because we gave it a style element called jigger and it's an ID, and it's been defined here in the style sheet. Okay, so hopefully this lesson summarized a bunch of these relationships between these different files, the style sheet, the jQuery, as well as the HTML, and I taught you how to use the selectors as well as how to call the add class and remove class functions on the different elements. Now, one thing I want to go over real quick is that I'm using the Chrome browser. And for those of you that have a CSS background in HTML, you may have used the Chrome developer tools, but I don't want to leave out those that haven't seen this tool before. It's actually very useful. Please use the Chrome browser for this course. There is a tool called Developer Tools, and you could just go to this ellipsis here, click on it, and go to More Tools, Developer Tools, and this provides some really handy functionality. If I want to navigate through the DOM of this web page, I could just hover my mouse here and notice that I can go through the different elements, and it highlights the respective elements on the page. So this is pretty handy. But something even cooler than this is this console tab. And this console tab, I could pretty much write jQuery code. So for example, if I wanted to target the jigger class element on this page, which is this guy right here, this P tag with the class jigger, let's target that using the console. I could do .jigger, just like a jQuery selector, and hit enter, and notice that it actually targeted that element. Expand this, hover your mouse here, and notice that it's targeting that guy. Now I could do stuff with that too. I could actually do .add class and give it the class, for example, colorful. Hit enter, and notice that the color changed to pink. And here in the Elements tab, you'll see that the colorful class has in fact been added to this p tag. So this is pretty cool. You're doing changes to the web page real time without changing your source code. Nothing changed here. This is your static page. But in the browser, this tool that's available to us, we can use it to test out the development of our web page. Similarly to adding the class, I could remove the class by just changing it to remove, and notice that it went back to black. There's also something called toggle class. So let me change this to toggle class. This is a new function that we may visit later on. Click on it and notice that it turned it to pink. And then if I enter that same one again, that same line of code, notice that it toggled it back to black. So toggle class is another method that applies the particular class, and then if it's already there, if this gets run again, it removes that class. All right, so it adds it, removes it, adds it, removes it. So you keep toggling back and forth by adding the class and removing the class. Now there's a lot more you can do with jQuery, not just adding classes and removing classes and toggling. There are a lot of other things you're going to learn about in jQuery, and you can test all of that code in this console. So I encourage you to have this fired up alongside, ready to go. I may bring it up from time to time, but for the most part, I might just be in the jQuery code file. But I want you to use this as much as you can and get the practice. This is a great way to practice the different functions and see your changes immediately. All the CSS selectors that you're going to learn about, all the traversing functions, the different effects that you're going to learn about in this course, you can test all of that stuff out directly right here in this console and see your changes in the HTML as they get applied. So pretty cool stuff. This lesson ended up being quite long, but we covered a lot of ground. So thanks for watching. I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll see you in the next lesson.